Welcome to this installment of supplemental lectures provided by PNC's Concurrent Enrollment Program. My name is Alexandra Kindle, and I will share some information with you that comes out of my History 151 course at Purdue University North Central. Today's lecture focuses on the issues surrounding the Alien and Sedition Acts. The founders had not envisioned a nation with political parties, but as they restarted the nation under the Constitution, two different visions of the nation emerged, and political parties formed around them. History teachers often refer to these two strains of thought in terms of Hamiltonian and Jeffersonian ideals, and I have summarized the major differences between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans here on this slide. George Washington, of course, was a Federalist encouraged to support the creation of the Constitution after Shays' Rebellion demonstrated that the national government needed more power. But Washington could not stay in office indefinitely, and things got a bit messy as Americans looked to finding new leaders. George Washington refused to run for a third term, even though there was nothing in the Constitution forbidding it. The Federalists got together in a caucus to nominate John Adams, the vice president, as the next presidential candidate. While Thomas Jefferson ran as a Republican, it was a close race, and Adams won only by 3 electoral votes. At that point in history, the runner-up became vice president, so Jefferson became the vice president, and thus we had a split party in the White House. John Adams won the election, but the Federalists were divided. Some had wanted Adams, while others supported another Federalist, Thomas Pinckney. To add to his troubles, his vice president was the leading Republican. So as you can see from the electoral votes, there was as many or more Federalists interested in someone who was not Adams as much as they were interested in Adams. After the Revolution, the first international tensions were with England, but over time troubles with France brought the U.S. closer to war with that country. French vessels captured American ships, and the U.S. sent Charles Cotesworth Pinckney to France to negotiate for a peaceful solution. The French refused to talk to him, and Adams sent additional men in 1797, hoping to convince the French to negotiate. When the Americans arrived, 3 agents of the foreign minister greeted them, asking for a loan for France and just a few bribes for themselves. Not a big deal, maybe a couple for their friends. Pinckney was outraged, exclaiming, "No, no, not a sixpence." Adams reported on these events, but deleted the names of the agents, referring to them as X, Y, and Z. The XYZ affair created outrage against France, and the U.S. fought in an undeclared war with the French for 2 years. In response, Congress created the Department of the Navy and appropriated money to construct new warships. The British dislike of the French trumped its dislike of the Americans, and the English provided the American Navy with ammunition and officers to train the unskilled American Navy. USA number 1. The French knew it would be difficult to defeat the U.S. with Britain's help and was willing to negotiate terms. This was good for the U.S. because Americans were able to break the virtual alliance with France made during the Revolution. Things should have been as simple as this, but Adams' successful management of the war with France was marred by the political events that came out of all this. As we reviewed earlier, Federalists and Republicans clashed over policies, and the war only exacerbated the tensions between the two. The Federalists passed a series of laws that seemed to be about the war with France, but Democratic Republicans and historians both agreed that these laws were focused on the Federalist political opponents. This was not the first nor the last time that politicians used war as an excuse to silence voices that opposed them. Federalists argued that wild Irishmen and other non-English immigrants disrupted national tranquility, which might have also been men who voted for the Republicans. So the Federalists passed legislation, and Adams signed it. While the reported goals of the laws could be justified by war, the covert purpose was to limit the political support of Democratic Republicans. And here's a little basic summary. While 3 of the acts were focused on foreign persons in the United States, the Sedition Act was used to directly attack the political opposition. More than 20 Republican editors were arrested under the law and some were imprisoned. Despite violating the First Amendment, Republicans had little recourse because the Supreme Court was stacked with Federalists. Here's a little closer-up view of the Sedition Act. There's a few lines worth pointing out. Let's see. If any person shall write, print, utter, or publish anything false, scandalous, or malicious, that leaves a lot of room for pretty much anything said about the government if it's not full praise. So anything that might defame the government, and that's definitely violating the First Amendment. On the short term, the Alien and Sedition Acts hurt the Republicans and did little to help the war or discourage immigration. Yet the Democratic Republicans had been attacked, and they knew that they had to rally hard to oust the Federalists who were willing to go to such extremes. And rally they did. And this graphic gives you a little idea of what actually happened, but it really wasn't much. Back to the rallying. There are three longer-term consequences of the Federalist legislation. By 1800, the Republicans were able to gain control of the national government. The Federalist Party dissolved, ending the first-party system in the United States. And finally, maybe most important, Thomas Jefferson and James Madison brought a new idea into the national conversation when they authored the Kentucky and Virginia resolutions. Jefferson and Madison introduced the idea of nullification. Dun, dun, dun. Jefferson, of course, had argued in the Declaration of Independence that governments were based on social contracts, and contracts could be broken. There was too much at stake to end the government over this, but Jefferson and Madison provided the states with an option to nullify laws that did not meet their needs as a part of the contract. Federalists and Republicans argued about the validity of nullification, even resulting in a fight in the House of Representatives. Republican Matthew Lyon spit in Federalist Roger Griswold's eye, and a full-fledged fight ensued. Now, if politicians acted like this now, I think we'd be all watching this on television, right? Nullification would, of course, lead to a political crisis in the 1830s, and it parented a more insidious idea known as secession. When the colonists rejected the monarchical form of government and created a republican democracy, they started an experiment in governance. The Federalists, those who had advocated the Constitution, put them and it put them into positions of power, dominated the government for the first 12 years. But with the Alien and Sedition Acts, the Democratic Republicans were able to make their voices heard and tested the new nation. Power transferred from one group of people with a particular vision of national growth and governance to another. As these two different ideas found their place in the national conversation, politicians set dangerous precedents for the consequences of these ideas. This was an ongoing process, and the Union would continue to be tested until 1861, when the two different visions could no longer coexist. Hamilton and Jefferson both contributed to the coming of the Civil War with their ideas about the implied powers clause of the Constitution and nullification. But for now, you still need to learn about the Jeffersonian era, so I'll leave you with that. But I hope that this lecture on the Alien and Sedition Acts gives you some things to think about the past as well as the present. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that this information helps you in your studies. We all hope to see you at PNC when you are done with your high school degree.